Devinder, am I audible?
Yes, Siri, you're audible. How about me?
Yeah, okay. Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Okay. What if Earth was the only habitual place? But we are fortunate enough to be blessed with this vast space around us. Earth may be the cradle of humanity, but mankind cannot stay in the cradle forever. Happy Space Evening, everyone. I am very delighted to be here with you all today. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening for Outreach 2021. I am Namana Siriyam Gowda from SSERD, currently pursuing my Bachelor of Technology in Aerospace Engineering from MS Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences. I've always been inspired by space, its vastness, and the mysteries it unwinds with our exploration. I'm also habitual to space art. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to SSERD for giving me this opportunity. We are SSERD, Society for Space Education, Research and Development. We are a community committed to elevating and fostering space and research education universally. We emphasize on providing an innovative and exciting hands on space education. At SSERD, we create and nurture the love for deep space and science. Our focus rests on the young minds to develop a fondness for space science. We start laying the path for the students right from their primary education, which builds up their scientific curiosity. It gives them immense exposure in the field of space technology and astronomy. As they say, Space Mountain may be the oldest ride in the park, but it still has the longest line. At SSERD, we offer online courses, workshops, projects, and internships on wide range of topics related to space, astronomy, and aerospace sectors, which is open for students at all levels. For more information, please contact our official website. With me, I have Devinder Singh Diora, and together we are the managing team for the university section of Outreach 2021. I would now request Devinder to hop in and introduce himself and the Outreach Program 2021. Devinder, over to you.
Thank you, Namana. And I would also like to thank SSCRD for providing me the opportunity to be as the co-host for the next 6 days. I, Devendra Singh, currently pursuing BTech in Aerospace Engineering, would welcome all of you with immense pleasure in the grand event of SSCRD, that is the Outreach Program. From humans' curiosity, what makes us to know something is the question. What is that something? In the same analogy, what do we mean by outreach program? SSCRD's outreach program is a way of connecting space enthusiasts throughout the world, giving them a chance to acknowledge the beauty of space, science, and technology. In simple words, we are trying to reach out about the knowledge of space and space related things through this program. Outreach Program 2020 was a successful online space program which had around more than 20,000 registrations from more than 50 countries. To improvise, Outreach Program 2021 is extended, which beholds events for school and university students, teachers, as well as the common public. And surprisingly, we reached more than 50,000 registrations this year. Now, I would thank Genex Space for sponsoring and collaborating with us. Now, let me tell you guys a short story, a story of perseverance. Before Wright brothers succeeded in their first powered flight, they went through a lot of failures. And at one point of time, they even got frustrated and decided to go back to their home, leaving their misspent work. While going back, one of the Wright brothers commented that nobody will fly for 1,000 years. But now, we are at the stage not only able to fly, but also to achieve greater heights, exploring space and new planets. Keeping this in mind, we would begin our today's discussion on the topic why space. And for our today's discussion, we have a few speakers. Our first speaker, Sujay Sridhar, who is the chairman and co-founder at SSCRD. Our second speaker, Herb Baker, who is currently on the board of directors of the NASA Alumni League. One of the researchers at Stockholm International Space Research Institute is also among us, Nivedita Raju, who will be sharing her thoughts and views on space. SSERD welcomes all of them and also acknowledge for providing their valuable time. Now, I request Namana to take over the meet and introduce the moderator for the day.
Thank you, Devinder. Now I would like to introduce the moderator for today, Sindhu Paramasivam. Sindhu is a doctoral graduate from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and former employee of Rolls-Royce Singapore. She is currently working on developing sustainable space community in the Asia Pacific region. She is the co-admin of Space Merves, a clubhouse platform for space enthusiasts, and co-founder of Asia Pacific Oceania Space Association. Now, I would like to request Sindhu to take over. Over to you, Sindhu. Sindhu, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Namana and Devendra, for the kind introduction. And thank you, SSERD, for this amazing opportunity. I'm excited to be here in this session today, and I'm sure you're all too. The topic we have today is really interesting, especially considering the audience of this week's program. There are different perspectives on why space is important. Each individual have their own reasons as to why they are crazy about space and why space is unique sector. Today, we have here three distinguished guests to share their perspectives on this regard. I'll be welcoming them one by one to share their thoughts, and at the end, there will be a mini panel discussion. The participants are encouraged to post your questions to the speakers on the comment section, and we will address them towards the end of the session. Firstly, I extend my warm welcome to all the guests here today. We'll be starting with Mr. Sujay Sridhar. He is co-founder and chairman of Society for Space Education, Research and Development, SSERD, managing director and CEO of GenX Space. Having worked at Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, Air India, and being the former CTO of Obro Solutions, a Delhi-based real estate startup, he has demonstrated his unique talent to develop innovative ideas and bring them to life. His works have primarily been focused on aerospace and STEM education worldwide, with a reach of up to 20,000 students through his programs and efforts. He is also one among the Geospatial World 50 Rising Stars. Over to you, Sujay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sindhu. So let me just quickly share my screen. So today we have an interesting topic. First of all, I want to welcome all of you who are watching this online to our outreach program. We had a wonderful year last year, and this year we thought, okay, let's continue and expand the reach more. That's why we have different programs for all of you, like university students, school students. Even we have a program for teachers and general public. So I'll just quickly run through why we started SSERD, and then I will talk about why space is important and how is it helping us in a day-to-day life. So SSERD was started back in 2016 as a part of our efforts to bridge the gap between students and the scientists in the space industry. One of the things which we noticed is that everyone wants to be in the space industry, but no one really knew how to come in or ask for help or connect with the engineers and scientists. So that is why one of the important goal of us is to connect both of you together. And that is why we organize these kind of workshops, talks, and we also have internship programs where we can work on space related projects. We traveled a long way since 2016, and we are here in 2021. So let me quickly go into our topic for a day: why space? So when I was talking, or when you think about space, there are only few things which comes to your mind, or generally speaking, there are only few topics which comes to everyone's mind. We've been interacting with a lot of students. We always start with this question: when I say space, what comes to your mind? Okay, these are the answers generally we get. They say rockets, then they say satellites, then astronauts. These are the things what generally we think about. Now, people say, okay, we are investing a lot of money into space industry. How is it helping us? Or why we should explore space? Now, an interesting thing which all we should remember is what we are trying to do now is to make our life multiplanetary. Let's go to the couple of things why or how space industry is helping us. So space is something which which is around us, or the technology in space uh, we use every day. Now, coming from telephone, we have television. Everyone watches TV. So there, you when you're watching TV, the signals actually comes from space. There's antennas which are sitting on top of our house, which is taking the signals from satellites, and you are able to watch TV. Now, a new class of satellites are being built for providing internet access to remote areas of the world, thanks to Elon Musk and his Starlink constellation. So many such constellations are coming up, which is going to provide internet access to all the corners of the world. Then, other way, we use ATMs uh, for withdrawing money. We use GPS for booking an Uber or booking an Ola, or for the delivery of our foods. We use GPS. Then every day morning, or at least me, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I check is how is the weather going to be. All these things are possible because of the space technology and advancement of space technology, and uh, the connections with space, right? So let me just say a couple of things. As I said, satellite internet is going to be one of the biggest thing which is going to come, which is going to connect all over the world. Like, it's going to connect the entire world into internet using satellite technology, because there is inherent problems for connecting everywhere with the cables, and satellites provides an easier access to reach to the remote areas. The next is something called remote sensing. So we know a lot about our planets because of the remote sensing. Everyone must have used Google Maps. Everyone must have used Google Earth. And where do they get these images from? They actually get it from satellites. Beyond Google Maps, beyond Google Earth, we have a lot of applications for satellite imageries. We use these images to predict the weather. We use these images to predict what is going to be the crop yield, how the rain pattern is going to be, how the wind pattern is, where are our ships, where are our planes. All this information is gained just from the satellite imageries. So we have been launching a lot of satellites into space. We had around 7,500 satellites uh, in space now, and out of which only couple of hundreds of satellites, like 2,500 of the satellites are in operation. Rest all are becoming a space debris. That is one of the major opportunities which are going to come in the future to clean up these debris. And coming back to the next one, we are utilizing our resources, like we've been doing it like a crazy pace, where we've been digging up all the minerals and materials and damaging our ecosystem, and making this certain parts of the world inhabitable, which opens a way for something called asteroid mining or space mining, where we going to go to space and mine for things, materials, minerals, gases, or anything which is valuable for us, which we can mine from space and come back and utilize in Earth. And one of the common questions what we generally get is, we have a lot of problems on Earth, and why do we spend, or why do we have that kind of money being spent? Like, if you take in the case of India, we spend approximately $1 billion on space research. Now, why do we spend that kind of money and spend a lot of money on sending satellites into space, or sending satellites into Mars or Moon? All this helps us understand the universe better, helps us understand how the universe works, which will help us understand, okay, what is going to happen next, or if there is any potential threat for us. from an asteroid or a comet, which is probably going to come and hit Earth. It will provide us with information as such to, uh, you know, and then we have spin-off, something called spin-off. All these all these points which I have noted here: artificial limbs, cochlear implants, something called freeze drying, and invisible braces, scratch resistant lenses. Like the glass I'm wearing, it is scratch resistant, and all these things are a part of the space industry, or it actually derived from the space industry and being used on the civilian purpose. I have an interesting number on the bottom. It says 1:14. That means for every $1 NASA invest into space industry, we get $40 worth of spin-offs back to us. So all these things, all we every day take our selfies on the phone, and the CMOS sensor or the image sensor which are inside the cameras are actually a part of the satellite technology, or it was actually developed for satellites back in making the spy satellites. And I want to end off. We will discuss more on why this is important, how it's important on the discussion part. So I want to just end off with one of the quotes which I like very much. As long as we are a single planet species, we are vulnerable to extinction by a worldwide or a planet-wide catastrophe. It can be basically natural or self-induced, like nuking each other. Or once we become a multi-planetary species, the chances of we surviving is more. Basically, we have two copies of humans on two different planets, and both of them getting destroyed is the chances of that is very less, right? So with that quote, I'm going to end, and I'll pass it on to Sindhu. Sindhu, I think you're on mute again.
I'm really sorry. So it was an insightful overview of space applications, space spin-offs, and how it is useful in our day-to-day lives. Remote sensing and satellite communication, as you mentioned, indeed have wide downstream applications, paving way for new business opportunities as well. Sustainable space and asteroid mining, as you rightly quoted, are truly exciting segments of future space. Thank you, Sujay, for the final note where you spotted that, the probability of survival is higher. And with that final note, I'd like to move on to our next guest of the evening, Ms. Nivedita Raju. She is a researcher at Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. Sorry for the mistake earlier. It's Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. With a focus on space security, she also conducts research and outreach in disarmament education. In addition, Nivedita is a mentor for the UN Space for Women program and director of legal affairs at the nonprofit Space Code Foundation. Previously, she was a research fellow at Open Lunar Foundation and a contributing member of Manual on International Law Applicable to Military Use of Outer Space, MILA-MOS. Over to you, Nivedita. Over to you. I think you are on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about
Happens.
that. I just
No,
constantly
no problem.
happens.
Happens. Yep.
I was saying thank you, Sindhu, for that introduction, and thank you to SSERD for inviting me and hosting this series of events. So for me, when I'm asked why space, this question immediately prompts me to raise all the ways in which we are dependent on space technology today. Some visible, some not so visible. And Sujay has already touched upon this and explained this quite comprehensively. And that is that space is a huge component of our everyday lives. It impacts us both individually and collectively. As he mentioned, from GPS to telecommunications, individually again, and then relying on weather forecasts for agricultural production for an entire economy or disaster management. We undeniably depend on space as part of our daily lives. So, in this context, the question of why space is an important one. Because space provides these essential benefits for us, we need to ensure that these resources are equitably used and that our activities in space are conducted in a peaceful manner. So this raises the significance of regulation and space law. As Sindhu mentioned, I'm a space security specialist and my background is in space law and policy. So I'd like to share a little background on this subject and how you, our viewers, the community at SSERD, can get involved in these ongoing conversations. So, space law is comprised of several elements. The backbone of international space law is the Outer Space Treaty, which provides rules on how space activities should be conducted by all countries in a manner that is safe and secure and sustainable. And from the language of the treaty, it is evident that the drafters aim to introduce laws to ensure that space would be used for the benefit of all states, all nations, and not only by the global north. And the enactment of the Outer Space Treaty was then followed by four additional multilateral conventions, namely the Agreement on Rescue and Return of Astronauts, the Liability Convention, the Registration Convention, and the Moon Agreement. Although this agreement receives a lot less attention on the international stage because a smaller number of countries are party to it. So, what's interesting is these international treaties all came into force in the late 60s and early 70s. And so, it's important to remember the political and historical context of these laws. They were introduced in the wake of the Cold War, and today, well, a lot has changed since then. In particular, space lawmaking itself has transformed from then to now. For starters, it's become much more difficult to introduce new regulation for the space domain on a multilateral scale. We can clearly see that the types of actors and activities in space has diversified. Technology has made a number of things possible. And Sujay again touched upon this earlier with asteroid mining, with space resource utilization for the moon. And we are also on the brink of space tourism today. So these activities in the space sector are no longer occurring on a state to state basis. They involve companies, they involve individuals like you and me. So clearly, we do need more regulation and laws to clarify some of these legal positions. However, it has not been easy to simply introduce new laws through treaties. Getting countries to agree and see eye to eye has been challenging, to say the least. And so space lawmaking evolved in response. Instead of focusing on things purely on an international multilateral level, states now are adopting national legislations and domestic policies which interpret ambiguities in international space law. This change in space lawmaking is supported by the change in the dynamics between countries themselves. Space, unlike the 60s, is no longer accessible only to a powerful few. The US and Russia are no longer the key dominant players. China has risen, India has risen, and there are a number of other countries, some of them considered middle space powers by experts in our field. And these countries have all become very prominent participants. I wouldn't like using the term space race or race to the moon. I think that our activities in space shouldn't be perceived as a race because this kind of language and this kind of framing only encourages a more toxic and competitive approach, which can enhance existing political rivalries between states. But this background and these dynamics are very important to understand now, especially with our renewed attention on the moon. Over the last year, two distinct international partnerships have emerged: the US-led Artemis Accords, through the US-led Artemis Accords, and through the Russian-Chinese-led International Lunar Research Station. Um, Between these two partnerships, there has been some concern that due to the political nature of these relationships, there would be some need for an arrangement, a cooperation mechanism, or some channel of communication between these two ongoing initiatives at the same time. It is imperative that these states, all states involved really in lunar exploration, especially given ongoing tensions, open these channels for communication, engage in dialogue, and agree on some kind of foundational shared rules for the use of the moon. Because we are currently in a period of rising tension, there are certain kinds of conduct and behaviors which can also be misunderstood. And this is not just on the moon, this is for space in general. And these misunderstandings arise due to a lack of information. Um, there is this rise of certain types of behaviors which may not necessarily be unlawful, strictly speaking, under international law, or maybe this line is blurred. But essentially, I'm referring to the kinds of behaviors that are harmful because they encourage these misunderstandings and misperceptions. Misperceptions can, in turn, trigger an ill informed response from a rival that might lead to escalation and possibly conflict. And conflict is an outcome that everyone wants to avoid because a conflict in space would negatively impact all end users. I mean, we heard from Sujay how dependent everyone is on space. And so any kind of conflict would impact all of us, whether or not we are directly involved. And so, in the midst of this scenario where dynamics have changed, where space lawmaking has evolved, technological prowess has increased, political alliances are shifting, our shared priority should be to work towards that end goal of ensuring continued peaceful use and preventing any conflict. We need to seek solutions that will ease tensions while simultaneously finding ways for space activities to expand in a manner that benefits all stakeholders, that is, both state and non state actors. So, where is your role, the students and young professionals in the community of SSERD? Where do you fit in this backdrop? Well, I believe that each of you has something unique to contribute. Each of you has different life experiences, different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, educational backgrounds, and different skill sets. Each of you will come to the table with your own perspective. Each of you will have different approaches for problem solving. And so all of you can contribute to these ongoing discussions and find innovative solutions or proposals for the safe, secure, and sustainable use of space. Because you are all stakeholders, there is a need for you to participate and voice your opinions. I think a traditional there's a traditional mindset associated with this, and it is that we are used to thinking that these issues, that space regulation, that law is that policy is primarily or entirely government driven, but that is changing because of the diversification that I mentioned earlier. And so SSERD can be a gateway for your perspectives to be shared and communicated. And I guess that brings me to my next point a little closer to home. And I'd refer to the thinking here in India, where we kind of pigeonhole ourselves as students and even as young professionals. I think that we tend to think that once we choose a field, we have to stay within that profession. But let me emphasize that that is simply not true. For example, if you've studied engineering, you can still branch out later, do a public policy degree, and merge your two skill sets. And for me personally, I was compelled to find my way into space security, not because I set out with this goal in high school or even in law school, thinking that this would be my that was not the case at all. In fact, my path to space security was not awakened by the 2015 US announcement of the American Space Act, which recognized private entities' ownership over space resources, which I was intrigued by. So, parallel to my work at the firm, I would come back and research this entirely on my own. And I was finally compelled to present my ideas. I was invited to a conference at McGill University. And it was that experience that lit a spark. I ended up joining McGill for a master's in space law as the Erin J.C. Arsenault Fellow, and I was then selected to work on several exciting space law projects. And this gave me first-hand work experience. I was given the opportunity to work on cross-border suborbital flights and how to regulate them between Canada and the US for the Federal Aviation Administration. I also worked on the Millimos project that Sindhu mentioned earlier. But I think that the main idea here is that you need to really put yourself out there. And once you realize that you are not restricted by the subjects that you study, that you're constantly learning and you're constantly able to get exposure, you'll have a lot more opportunities when you think. After my time at Millimos, I joined Open Luna Foundation as a research fellow, and I was also leading an action team for the Moon Dialogues process. This platform is a very innovative and inclusive one, and I suppose maybe we can chat about this again in the mini panel segment. But this is such a great platform, but because all of you can participate and exchange views on LUDA policy. And I really enjoyed working in this space because academia, government, and industry can all join the discussions, whether virtual or sometimes maybe you can even try and figure out a way in a post-pandemic world to even meet other people that you've met through this platform and try and just facilitate new ways of thinking about how we should approach activities on the moon. Um, and I later joined SSERD as associate researcher for space security, and now I'm working on space security full time. But while I've been in this field, I have been struck increasingly how there are so few of us from India working in space security. It is very rare to find a South Asian voice in space security conversations. let alone a young Indian woman. And so at SSERD, I've also been working ways to increase accessibility of resources, raise awareness, and create more opportunities for students in this line of work. And mentoring young girls in the UN Space for Women network, I've learned that there is no dearth of young talent, and we can see that here, even within this community at SSERD. The Indian space sector has a lot of capacity. We have achieved so much. We've made a name for ourselves in the global space sector. And Indian innovation has created low-cost alternatives to space technology. So we are not dependent on other states for support as much as we used to be. And of course, we still need to see more support at the domestic policy level through clear regulation. But in terms of our talent, in terms of you, and again, I'm addressing all of you here, the of this program, you will eventually be working on groundbreaking achievements for India. And I shared my experience in the hope that this serves as an example to you, that once you pick a stream of study, you put yourself out there, make sure you're not restricted to it, and keep learning. And so what I hope we can do, even through this community, is find ways that you can contribute to discussions here in India and seek opportunities to develop our sector within the country and also share the Indian perspective with other countries abroad. And I'd also just like to quickly emphasize that for women and young girls here in India, you can try and find a mentor who could guide you and help you navigate this process. And just make sure that you do not hesitate to apply for these opportunities. A lot of the time, I find students reaching out to me saying, "There's no way we could have gotten that scholarship," or "I'm not good enough," or "I don't have enough work experience." And please, this is very flawed thinking. I think that once you put yourself out there and actually apply, you'll be surprised. You will surprise yourselves. So yes, I would just say I'd like to conclude by saying that I think that our students in our communities here have a lot of potential. And yes, I think I'm looking forward to that mini panel discussion at the end, seeing how we could find more opportunities for them to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Nivedita. I mean, I have been there, the position that you are saying, rethinking about applying to a scholarship or an opportunity, be it within India or abroad. So I do understand what it takes. So yeah, Nivedita has rightly pointed out, please do go for it and do it, no matter what the outcome is. Okay. And yeah, I also agree that we are also the stakeholders, and we as individuals can take responsibility to do something about it through different educational platforms such as this. And awareness about national and international space law and policy is absolutely necessary and needed at this time of hour, where many countries are entering and strengthening their space sector. Students are to be encouraged to also look into this aspect of space sector apart from technology, as it shapes up a nation's space strategy. You would be surprised on how much this impacts the national space sector growth. With final takeaway that we have to ensure peaceful usage of outer space, I'll now move on to our final speaker of the evening, Mr. Herb Baker. Thank you, Nivedita. Mr. Herb Baker recently retired from NASA after 42 years of service. He spent most of his career at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, supporting the Space Shuttle and Space Station programs, but also worked at the Kennedy Space Center and NASA headquarters. His last position was serving as the manager of the Operations Support Office, which provided support to the Flight Operations Office and included support to the Astronaut Office, Mission Control Operations, NASA's Aircraft Operations, and astronaut training. He is currently on the board of directors of the NASA Alumni League. Without further delay, I invite Mr. Baker on stage. Over to you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Sindhu. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And actually, the first thing I'd like to say is how happy I was that the theme of this year's World Space Week was Women in Space. I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing women in the space industry, including astronaut Nicole Stott, who was a good friend of mine and was part of the event here last week. And I love seeing them getting credit and being recognized. Nicole is just one of the many smart and talented women I've worked with in the space industry during my career. So let me spend just a minute before I get into the why space, telling you how I got into the space industry. I think it was fate. I was living in a small town near Houston as a kid, and they built the Johnson Space Center just a few miles from my home. So all of the NASA astronauts moved into our community, and all of their kids and the kids of other NASA employees became my friends and classmates in middle school and high school. I was just 17 and still in high school when I got a temporary job on site at NASA covering the Apollo 11, 12, 13, and 15 missions and 2 of the Skylab missions, working for the TV networks. Back then, there was no such thing as the internet or videotape. So when we filmed an interview in our studio there with an astronaut or flight director in Houston, we had to physically move that film from Houston to their studio headquarters in New York so they could show the film on TV. So my main job was twice a day to drive to the Houston airport, which was about 100 miles round trip, to drop off film to be flown from Houston to New York. But even after growing up around NASA, I never dreamed about working there professionally because I was good in math, but not in science. And so when I went to college, I was a business major, not a science or engineering major. So I never really thought I might have a career at NASA. But as I was finishing college and not knowing at that point what my career would be, I took a U.S. government test to see if working for the government was a possibility. That's the way you got a job with the government back then. You took what they called a civil service exam. So on the test, they gave you a score in 6 different categories, skills, aptitudes, to see if you scored highly enough, what job might be the best for you. And so, to my shock and surprise, when I got my scores back, I made almost a perfect score. I had 4 100s and 2 98s out of 100. So they sent the scores to all of the government agencies near where I live. And so NASA got my scores, and they contacted me and called me and said, "Hey, would you like to come interview for a job in our business office?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, of course, yes." It hadn't occurred to me that NASA also needed, in addition to all of the scientists and engineers and the astronauts, that they needed business and finance people too. So one interesting thing about that too also was that the guy, so I came to Houston for the interview, and the guy who interviewed me was the father of one of my friends from high school. So I don't know if that helped me get the job or not, but I'm sure it didn't hurt. So when I think of why space, 3 things come to mind. And of course, being the third speaker, Sujay and Nivedita have already mentioned a few of these things. But the first one is that, for me, is that humans have always been driven to explore the unknown, discover new worlds, and push the boundaries of our technical and scientific knowledge. I think it's part of our DNA. Back in history, in 1492, the King and Queen of Spain financed Christopher Columbus's voyage to sail west from Europe, seeking a more efficient route to India. His voyage resulted in the discovery of a new world. And in 1620, the settlers of this new world took a dangerous 66-day trip across the Atlantic Ocean aboard the Mayflower and began a new life on the east coast of what is now the United States. So almost 200 years later, the United States was a nation, but exploration continued, of course. American explorers and settlers made what was then a dangerous and sometimes deadly trip across the country to the West Coast. And in the early 20th century, the Wright brothers made the first airplane flight here in the US. And by the 1930s, people were flying airplanes all over the world. By the 1940s, rocket engineers and scientists were thinking about exploring space. And then in 1957, the Russians launched their first satellite, Sputnik, and the space race was on. Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel in space in 1961. And a few weeks later, NASA astronaut Alan Shepard became the first American in space. And then, of course, by 1969, we had landed the first men on the moon. So whether you're traveling on horses, covered wagons, ships, airplanes, or spaceships, we're always wanting to go farther, to places we've never been and discover new worlds we've never been to. I heard a NASA administrator say once, if we're going to send humans into space, the goals ought to be worthy of the cost, the risk, and the difficulty. A human spaceflight program with no plan to send people anywhere beyond the orbiting space station did not meet that standard, in his opinion. So NASA is working on going back to the moon with the Artemis program, of course, and then to Mars. I personally think it's going to be another 15 to 20 years at least before we're sending humans to Mars. There's so many things we haven't figured out yet. How to deal with the extra radiation you would receive on the trip, and propulsion. What vehicle would we take? How are we going to have enough food and water for whoever makes that trip? I think we're going to have to pre-position, when we do send humans there, we will have to have pre-positioned supplies and equipment and possibly a habitat for that to live in. And I would love to see it in my lifetime, but I'm not sure we'll get all of that done before that happens. The second thing that comes to mind is when people go to space, they come back and talk about how different it was to see the Earth with their own eyes rather than through photos or hearing it from their colleagues who may have been there, and how it makes them appreciate how beautiful and fragile our planet is. They even have a name for this. It's called the overview effect. One of my favorite quotes is from Bill Anders, who was one of the Apollo 8 astronauts that were the first humans to travel to another celestial body when they orbited the moon in 1968. They didn't land on the moon, but they orbited it. He took that famous, iconic Earthrise photo of the Earth rising above the moon's horizon as they were coming around on one of the lunar orbits. And what he said was, we came to explore the moon, and what we discovered was the Earth. And to show you how emotional it is for many astronauts, astronaut Alan Shepard, who walked on the moon on Apollo 14, said, when I first looked back at the Earth standing on the moon, I cried. So traveling to space and seeing the Earth from there was much more emotional than many astronauts expected it to be. Another astronaut, Ron Guerin, said, when we look down at the Earth from space, we see this amazing, indescribably beautiful planet. It looks like a living, breathing organism. But it also, at the same time, looks extremely fragile. Anybody else who's ever gone to space says the same thing, because it really is striking and it's really sobering to see this paper-thin layer, the atmosphere, and to realize that that little paper-thin layer is all that protects every living thing on Earth from death, basically, from the harshness of space. My friend astronaut Nicole Stott said that she was stunned in a way that was completely unexpected. It was beyond anything she had heard from her colleagues who had flown before her. They just can't describe it. You have to see it for yourself. She remembers looking out the window of the ISS, wanting to see her home, Florida, from space. So finally they were flying over Florida. She flew to the window to see it, and then felt that she wasn't looking at Florida the same anymore. It had just become part of this special part of her larger home, Earth. So I'm sure everyone knows that you can't see any country or state borders in space, but it's still surprisingly impactful when you actually see our world like that with your own two eyes. Another astronaut, Mike Massimino, had an interesting reaction to seeing Earth from space. His first reaction was, this is too beautiful for people to look at, and we're not meant to see this. So he turned his head, and then he realized, no, he should continue to look at the planet. So he looked back and got a bit emotional and started to tear up a little bit just from the beauty of our planet. And so there are many many more astronauts who felt this very same way. The point of all of this to me is that the more people who can go to space and see our planet with their own two eyes and experience it for themselves, because again, it seems that no matter how many pictures you see or who has been there and tries to tell you about it, it's just not the same until you actually see it and feel it for yourself. And so I'm really happy that we're seeing all of the commercial space flight and civilian astronauts getting to travel to space and see it for themselves. I think the more people who go to space and get to look back at Earth, the better off we'll be. So the third thing that comes to mind is, and a lot of this was already mentioned again by Sujay and Nivedita, is how the technology developed through space exploration helps our everyday lives down here on Earth. I don't think most people realize how many things they use every day came directly or indirectly from technologies developed for the space program. And some general examples, space technologies improve products we use every day, like weather forecasts and communications, improving healthcare. Experiments performed in space help us better understand health problems on Earth and help us develop cures for them. Getting young people interested in space. Things we do in space encourage young people to study science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM fields. Protecting our planet and environment. The satellites provide data on climate change and measure pollution. Satellites can predict natural disasters and support emergency relief efforts, and of course creates many jobs around the world. Another one for me is cooperating with countries around the world. There are, as you probably know, there are 15 countries involved in the International Space Station. And from the situation in world politics, you would never guess that the Americans and Russians could cooperate and get along as well as they do in space activities. Some other examples, as were mentioned earlier, GPS comes from navigation satellites. Improving access to clean water. I'm not sure a lot of people know that they developed a water purification system for the International Space System, the ISS. And so they recycle all of their urine and even sweat. This system works very well. And so that can be applied to use here on Earth too. Air purifiers, they developed air purifiers that help purify the air on the space station and can also help here on Earth. The cell phone cameras were mentioned, baby formula, even cordless vacuum cleaners. There was in order to have rocks and soil samples collected on the moon, researchers developed a lightweight battery-powered drill, and the motor technology was later used for cordless vacuum cleaners. Some of the other things that some were already mentioned, also things like scratch-resistant lenses, firefighting equipment, shock absorbers for buildings, solar cells, better tires, wireless headsets, and freeze-dried foods. So a couple of other things that, at least one of which, or a couple of which were already mentioned also, asteroids and comets. There are still a lot of dangerous asteroids and comets that could strike the Earth, and without a strong space program, we would have no way of possibly deflecting them and saving the planet in the future. Some people believe we should try to colonize to another planet like Mars, create a backup for humanity, and so that we could survive no matter what happens to Earth. And so, it's possible that maybe future humans will be Martians who never set foot on Earth. But the technology to make that possible isn't going to develop itself. And the last one for me is space mining could help the world. As we develop new technologies on Earth, the strain on our natural resources increases, and the extraction of valuable minerals has led to problems, including environmental damage. I think Sujay mentioned that. And so startups like Planetary Resources want to mine asteroids instead of space, or instead of Earth, which would mean an effectively unlimited supply of raw materials that are rare on Earth. Some people also believe we should mine the moon for things like there's an abundance of helium-3, which could be used in energy production, and things called rare earth metals that are used in modern electronics. So anyway, that's I'll end it there. There's a long list. I could talk for much longer about all of the, in my opinion, all of the many varied, wonderful reasons that we should invest in space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. It is definitely an inspiring story on how you came into the space sector. I can't imagine growing up near NASA JSC. To hear from you the history of space activities through decades makes it even more special and inspiring. Also, thank you for sharing, Mr. Baker, about the overview effect, the realization that this is all we have got. A tiny, fragile ball of life hanging in the void, shielded and nourished by a paper-thin atmosphere. It is true that space is an enabler of international cooperation. The space-based assets are extensively used in protecting life and achieving global sustainable development goals. Like Mr. Baker mentioned, space mining, space medicine, space colonization, and the topics cannot be limited to 1 hour span on why space is an interesting and inspiring sector. With that, now that we have heard different perspectives of our speakers on the session topic, we will open up the floor for a mini panel discussion. I invite the rest of the 2 speakers as well to join us on the stage. So, yeah, hello everyone. I'll be starting off with the first question, which is to all 3 of you. Why space education and awareness is important at this time of our? Probably we will go we'll go with anybody who is preferred to talk first. Yeah.
Well, I'll start.
Sure, go. Yeah.
So of course, to continue doing the things we're doing in space, we need to have, even though I wasn't one, scientists and engineers and people in the STEM fields, and so I think we need to, and that's actually what I spend a lot of my time doing now that I've retired is promoting STEM engagement and trying to send out the message how important that is, and encouraging people to become involved and look at those kind of careers. And so I definitely think that's important, and that we're going to need, and not just for space activities, for many other things that make the world a better place to live. We need those science, technology, engineering kind of people to do those things for us.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
If I could add to that.
Sure, go.
I do think that's why I think that Herb has articulated that perfectly, and that's why we need more people. That's why we need more involvement in this particular sector. I do also think it's a matter of expanding opportunities and access, right? I think that the more that we innovate and the more people that get involved, space isn't viewed as an exclusive thing anymore. This is a resource for everyone, as I mentioned earlier. It's meant for all of humankind. It's not just for meant to be monopolized by a few nations or meant to be enjoyed by a few nations, but for everyone. And I think it's important to do that now, because while we're exploring other planets, while we're looking at Mars, and of course even our moon, we need to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes that we made here on Earth. And accessibility and making sure that more people are included in these conversations will be key to that. And so that's why I think space education and awareness would be so important to that, to make sure that we're broadening access and we're opening doors to the rest of the people that actually want to participate and can have a say in these conversations.
Okay.
Perfect.
Adding, yeah, please.
Yeah, go on. Go
Okay,
on, go on.
adding on to all the other panelists was mentioning, I think space is something inspires everyone, right? And we've been seeing a lot of students who gets excited by rockets and satellites and airplanes and things. Now, it actually opens up their mind to study science. I mean, okay, we are talking about space, we are teaching about space, but it actually adds on to their curiosity generally about science and technology, which will make better engineers, better scientists who not only work only on space industry, may have some, important impact on other industries as well, right? And adding on to that, when we see planets, when we see moon, in fact, when we see on the telescope, it actually gives that feeling, oh my God, this universe is so huge. I mean, in fact, when I just walk around sometimes at night and see on moon, and I was like, sometimes I'll feel, oh man, that like, there were people who walked on moon. It's 3 lakh kilometers away, and still people walked on moon and came back safely. And that too, it was like 40, 50 years back. And all those things, when it comes to your mind, it is like, even though it's overwhelming information, it excites people and it basically makes a better future. And space technology, as everyone was mentioning, it is an integral part of our day-to-day life. Even if you don't like it or not, it is, we are dependent on space technology from the moment you wake up till the time you sleep. It is important, so that pursuing a career in space is becoming easier, rather than a couple of years back when we had like only NASA or ISRO, or state space agencies are there. Right now there are a lot of opportunities which are opening on the private sector, where people are hiring for different positions. Even there are companies who are launching their own rockets, right? And even in India, we have private companies who are actually building rockets and satellites, and which opens up a lot of opportunities for the students apart from their general whatever they used to study. And yeah, I think that is one of the reasons why we should teach people about space, to bridge that gap, thinking that it is something of huge which is not obtainable for common public. So we need to just remove that perception of people telling that, okay, space is something you can actually approach. So yeah, I think that is one of the reasons too.
Thank you, panelists, for giving me your perspectives on this question. It's truly amazing how to hear your views. And with that, I'll go to the next one. How students can empower themselves with industrial knowledge and stay up to date with all the skills and science. Yeah. I again request all three of you to add your thoughts on it.
Okay, I
Um,
think yeah, please. No problem, no problem. Yeah, please.
Sure, Sujay. Thank you. I was going to say, I think that something that's not encouraged as much is attending these events and going for conferences and just approaching people, even messaging people, sending messages on LinkedIn. Now during the pandemic, I think people are slowly realizing that even though remote connection doesn't really matter, you can still send someone an email. The worst that could happen is that they just don't respond. But in our sector, a lot of people are willing to give advice, no matter what profession. In the space sector, I think everyone's kind of united by this one passion. So if as a student or a young professional you reach out to someone, just give it a shot. It's a shot in the dark, but there's absolutely no harm with reaching out and asking for advice. So I think that that's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is going for these events and virtual conferences now, it's actually something that's been made a lot more accessible because of the pandemic. And just learning from the panelists, they're learning what they have to say, maybe contacting them afterwards and asking for advice. I think that that's also really important because it helps you helps you one broaden your own knowledge of what are the current topics, what is being discussed, what are the issues that are relevant in each field. And I think that it also kind of points you in the direction of, if you want to enhance your education or if you want to enhance your skill set, then these people can give you that advice. And so I think that that's something that would also be really useful for students to hear. In terms of technical knowledge, of course, you would need to get further education in terms of universities. But even navigating further education, that in itself is quite a daunting task for a lot of students, for a lot of young high school, whether you're an undergrad or even seeking a master's degree. it's important to ask people, okay, I'm looking at applying to this school. What can you tell me? What are the projects like? What are the extracurriculars, co-curriculars like? What kinds of events would be hosted at this university? Would I be meeting professors externally also from here? So even asking for advice, even through this educational process, I think is also really important. And just making sure that you're talking to as many people as possible.
Thank you, Nivedita. Mr. Herbs, would you like to go next? You're muted, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so that's an interesting question for me because of my age, right? When I was growing up, there was no such thing as the internet, or personal computers. I had worked at NASA for 8 years before we got desktop computers, and so to me, the first thing that come to mind is there are so many opportunities, resources that are available to people, and I think most people take them for granted because they grew up with them. But I think back, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I used to go when I was a child or teenager. I would go to bed and I would read encyclopedias. I mean, that was other than school. That was that, and going to libraries was the only way you had to gain knowledge and learn what was happening in the rest of the world. And so I think people. So that would be my first suggestion: is to you should be thankful for all of the opportunities and resources that are available to you that weren't available in the past. I mean, you can take free online college courses at MIT, and that just blows my mind. And so the second part of that for me is, and I think this was mentioned a bit earlier. Don't be afraid to ask, approach someone, or that, and that's for many things in life, not just looking for a field in the space industry. It's just I think so many people miss out on opportunities because they're afraid of what that they may be turned down, or that they're not good enough, or that for any number of reasons, they're just afraid of what someone might think about them. But forget all of that. Just go for it. There's a famous phrase in the NASA world from Gene Kranz: failure is not an option. Well, that's fine. That was created for the movie Apollo 13, when he was one of the flight directors that saved the crew. He never actually said that, by the way. That was just a line written for the movie. And so, of course, now he's adopted that, and the title of his book is Failure is Not an Option. He signs everything, failure is not an option. But for me, and that's fine, failure is not an option if you're trying to save the lives of 3 astronauts, but otherwise, failure is a requirement. You've heard the thing, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. So I'm a firm believer in that. And so one last thing is, speaking of taking opportunities, taking advantage of opportunities. Here we are. The SSERD. This is just wonderful. So again, why I was more than happy to participate. This is a wonderful thing, and wow, the number of people that this is being made available to is just incredible. So thank you all involved in this for doing this. It's just a wonderful event.
I couldn't agree more with you, Mr. Herb. They are definitely doing like a really great job, and to pull off such a massive event, they are really passionate, and I'm really proud of the team SSERD. And over to you, Sujay, to add to these perspectives. You are on mute. We are on mute.
Yeah. Okay, got it. I was telling I couldn't agree more to what both of them have mentioned. Now, because of this pandemic, a lot of opportunity have opened up connecting people to online. People are realizing that there is possibilities to do things online. Right now, how we are speaking, how we used to do programs back back then was we used to organize physical workshops or physical programs. Well, we had a lot of limitation reaching out to a lot of people. Now, a lot of opportunities like that have come up. So attending these kind of programs, workshops always helps. Now, other important things which missed out by today's generation. I'm not gonna say that today's generation as such, but we see some these things every day, right? Because a lot of people reach out to us for positions and things to do work. Or so one of the important things what they miss out is developing their skill sets. I mean, there is no point in you just passing out from your university telling that, okay, I completed my aerospace engineering or I did my master's in aerospace engineering. It is not going to help you in any way. What you need to do is, along with your degree, you have to also develop your skills, learn some softwares, learn in depth about the topics you like. Half-baked knowledge is always dangerous, and people tend to not learn completely on what they want to do or what they like to do. I mean, there are a lot of people who are now saying, okay, I want to build satellites. When you ask them questions, right, they don't understand at least the basics of how these satellites work or what are the components, but they still want to build satellites. I mean, the first advice I would give them is you have to learn, you have to read a lot, understand how the systems work. A lot of facilities are there now available on the internet. You have a lot of books which are available, you have a lot of tutorials, you have a lot of workshops like these. You can all attend, read more, understand your systems more. Then is when you will be ready for the space industry, and you will get a better position, or you can get into this industry only with the right skills, because it's a very competitive industry. People are looking for the top talents. If you're on the bottom percentage, no one really wants a bottom percentage person in the space industry, because as Mr. Herb was mentioning, failure is not an option in space, right? And we would want the best of the best people working in this particular industry. Yeah. So uh, doing all this will give you a more chance of getting into space industry.
Thank you, Sujay. To just add to all of your thoughts and perspectives, just keep learning, and do not think that once you get a degree, it's going to be the end of it. Because even if you join any industry, any company, any startup, be it anything in any field, you are still going to learn. So just don't get disappointed that you have to keep learning, because I think you would get fatigued. You would have this impression that, okay, like once I finish the degree, I'll be fine, I'll be free. It isn't the real world. I'm really sorry to break that up to you guys, but it's what it is to take to be in a job, be it space or anything else. So just don't give up. If you feel fatigued about learning and reading, just take a break, but then get back get back to reading, get back to knowing more. Just pester people who are next level or even the higher levels to just share with you what you want to do. And right here you have all these panelists, and you have panelists over weeks. And if you need to connect with someone here, you can just reach them out in LinkedIn. I'm sure everyone here who are speaking will be more than happy to help you out, or at least give some pointers on where you should look for what. And yeah, of course, SSERD is, you can always contact their team, and they can get you connected with whoever you wish. But it all comes down to you trying to do something by yourself, and that drive should come from within you. And that's what I think all of us are trying to say by this question. Yeah, by answering to this question. So there is a lighter tone of fun question from the audience. Not fun, it's a different question. Is terraforming Mars possible, or is it a hoax? Any one of you want to take that question and answer it? I recently learned about it, but I'm not an expert or anything, so please go at it, any of you.
Okay. As you said, I'm also not an expert, but I don't think it is possible with the current technology we have. We would probably need to develop better technologies. There was a thought by Elon Musk telling that let's nuke Mars, and it will melt the polar ice caps and it will make it convert it into Earth-like planet, but I'm not sure how practical that is. But as far as the technology is concerned, I don't think we are there yet. But if the innovations on this space should be there in another 20-25 years, we should be able to do terraforming. Yes.
Any of you want to add or share? Okay. So we are here almost to the end of the session, and I would like each one of you to give a closing remark to our students in here. And with that, we can conclude and pass it over back to SSERD. Yeah. I would invite Sujay in the order of the speaking. Yeah, Sujay, go on. Give a closing remark.
Okay. Thank you so much. To close off, one important thing again, I want to remind all of you: if you want to come back, come to the space industry, one is connect with the right people, and then do the right programs or learn the correct skill set which you required. And it is a difficult industry to get on, so try and try again always. Yeah, I think I'll close that. Yeah, with that.
Okay. Thank you, Sujay. Ms. Nivedita, floor is yours. Yeah.
Apologies. Is my internet still good? Can you still hear me clearly?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
I would just like to end by I would just like to end by saying that again, I know that it's difficult to get an opportunity and it's difficult to find your way in. All you have to do is keep trying to find that person that will hold the door open for you. And I think that it's just a matter of time. Please don't be deterred. And I think Herb put it beautifully when he was talking about failure. I think that that's just something that we shouldn't be afraid of. And make sure that there are opportunities. Just make sure you're putting yourself out there and reaching out to people, and be patient. I would say be patient because it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nivedita. Herb, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my closing remark is really similar to what I've already said and what Nivedita just mentioned. And that is, having worked for NASA, and of course, while I was growing up around it, I thought everyone who worked there must be a genius, and again, I thought, well, I'm not smart enough to work at NASA. Well, don't think that, they're just, they're smart, dedicated, hardworking people, but they're not all geniuses. Just people who have some intelligence, but want to do what they're doing and be involved in space exploration. So I guess my main point is, don't think that you're not good enough. Don't let that stop you from trying. And again, I was in college, like I mentioned before it occurred to me that you can be heavily involved in the space industry without being a scientist or engineer. I don't want to discourage anyone from taking those tracks, but the space industry needs again, business and finance people. And today, unlike when I was starting, they need IT people, social media people. There's just any number of jobs that you can do to be part of the space industry. And again, even though I was a business major, I got to work every day with those astronauts and engineers and scientists and doctors. And even though I wasn't one of them, I got to work with them every day. I couldn't have imagined having a better career than I did. I feel very lucky.
Thank you, Mr. Herb. Thank you all the panelists for sharing your perspectives, thoughts, and answering all these questions and inspiring our students. And yeah, to close this session, even I would tell the same. Just don't give up. None of us who are sitting here are having, in the first shot. So just don't give up. Keep going at it. Keep communicating with people. Keep trying, and definitely you will, reach what you want to reach soon. With that, I will be handing it over back to Namana and Devender for continuing the session. See you guys.
Thank you, Sindhu.
Over,
Just now
over
we
to
have
you.
thank
Sorry.
you. Just now we have witnessed most insightful views on why space from our speakers. Yes, space is not just about astronauts, rockets, and satellites. We have been using space applications in our everyday lives in the form of ATMs, agriculture, weather broadcasting, telecommunications, GPS, and a lot more. When people apply themselves to the challenges of exploring space, they make discoveries that can help the world in other ways too. For example, studying how we might grow food in the orbit or on Mars yields insights into growing food in extreme conditions on Earth, generating knowledge that can help mitigate the impacts of climate change. Studying the cosmos gives us an important perspective shift. When we learn about what lies beyond Earth, it gives us context for understanding our own planet. With this, I would like to thank all the speakers for enlightening us with a new perspective on what space is and why it is important to explore space. Also, I would like to extend my appreciation to Sindhu for flawlessly moderating the session. Thank you, Sindhu. Proceeding further, let me share my screen. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for our sponsor, that is Genex Space. Genex Space is an edtech company dedicated to creating and providing high quality all around space education and services for students and institutions. Formed with the key takeaways of SSERD, a space education and outreach NGO, Genex Space is committed to igniting curiosity and preparing the young generation for this space age to solve significant challenges of our time with the help of space technology and science. We aim to educate and guide curious young minds to achieve their space dreams with space institutions, organizations, companies, startups, and professionals. We request you to go check out the courses provided by Genex Space at www.genex.space. I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude for our sponsor, Samarth Academy. Samarth Academy is one of the fastest growing online tuition and coaching edtech companies in India. Samarth offers personalized coaching classes for classes 1 to 12, IIT JEE, NEET, Comet K coaching. For further information, please check out their website, that is www.samarthacademy.in. Yes, now it's your time to put out your weaves on our question, that is, why space? Write down your insights on the same in your respective social media handles, especially LinkedIn and Instagram, and tag us using hashtag SSERD and hashtag whyspace. The best weaves will be reposted by us. Now, I would like to call upon Devender to take over. Devender, over to you.
Thank you once again, Namana. As we are at the end of the session, now comes the point where we need to know more about space, as every end is the beginning of another chapter. That is how ending of why space is actually the beginning of space. For upcoming days, we have a few more sessions on space-related topics. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Tomorrow, that is 12th October, we have two of the speakers who will be sharing their thoughts, ideas, and views on Big Bang and dark matter. We have Dr. Prajwal Shastri, who is an astrophysicist and adjunct professor at International Center for Radio Astronomy and Research. We also have Devika Kamath, who is a senior lecturer in astronomy and astrophysics at Macquarie University. I hope to see you all tomorrow. On 13th, to have a discussion on exoplanets and astrobiology, we have Dr. Chaitanya, who is an astrobiochemist, and also Dr. Margarita Safonova, who is an astrophysicist and visiting professor at IIA. On 14th, the topic seems to be interesting one on rocket technology, one of my favorite. For that, we have Dr. CVS Kiran, R&D and Strategy, Skyroot Aerospace Private Limited, and Gabe Gabriel, who is a former engineer at Kennedy Space Center, NASA, and a motivational speaker as well. On 15th, to have a talk on satellites, we have Arvind Ramachandran, who is the Director of Space Strategy, and Dr. Ayman Ahmed, who is a space imaging team leader at Egyptian Space Agency. On 16th, we have three speakers on the panel for the talk on entrepreneurial endeavors. First, Remco Timmermans, business analyst and social media specialist for space. Martinez Fedutovas, a science communicator at Space Explorer. Valentin Benoit, founder and CEO of Write, will also be with us. On the closing ceremony, our guest speakers include Dr. Anand Narayanan, NASA Space Biology, postdoctoral fellow at Florida State University, Samir Durde, in charge officer at public section at IUCAA, and Sujay Sridhar, who is well known to all of us by now. Now, the challenges are faced and realized more when there are competitions. For the college students, we have a three thought-provoking competitions. I would like to share my screen for the competitions. First, we have imaginative space design, where I am sure that your skills and creativity would be given a good amount of thrust. It deals with a scenario in which humans have destroyed most of their natural resources. So you need to come out with ideas for our existence. I think most of you guys would have seen science fiction movies like Interstellar and Martian. In script writing competition, you have a chance to develop a script on a space themed science fiction adventure. For the person, for sharp minds, we have Ideators Extravaganza, one of my favorite, in which you need to find an efficient way to reduce the time for a trip to Mars. Note, the deadlines will be given in our official website. I came across a quote that there are billions of places out there that we know nothing about them excites me, and I want to go out and find them. And that's what science is. As we have a very good beginning today on space, but the voyage on which we are traveling demands us to know more. For that, we have a discussion on Big Bang to dark matter, which would be accompanied by Dr. Prajwal Shastri and Devika Kamath and their views on it. I hope you all enjoyed and had fun learning and knowing about the views on space by our speakers. And I also hope to see you all with a much more enthusiasm tomorrow. For, for more information, visit our official website. Thank you all for being with us.